Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 132, and if you have a rake, you're going to be using it. I'm Kevin Carlson.
I'm Jeff Walton, and it is Wednesday, October 22nd, 2014.
Well, it's not a younger George, it's actually Jeffrey Walton, and he's on because we need a statistician to help us with the new Episcopal Church numbers that are out, and I thought Jeff could help us out. He works for the IRD, which is kind of the black ops operation out of Washington, D.C., which tracks the changing church. And you did an article last week about the reduced numbers in the Episcopal Church. I thought it'd be a great time to talk about it. For the last 20 years or so, the Episcopal Church has been shedding numbers left and right. All the reasons are the same, which we'll talk about later in the show, but what are the latest statistics, Jeff?
Well, Kevin, the Episcopal Church reported about 27,000 members were shed, and that drops the church down about 1.4% in membership this year. It also reported about 2.6% decline in attendance, which is probably the more dramatic number. Mm-hmm. So this is a continuation of what we've been seeing over the last 10 years. However, there's some really interesting parts of this data that show that the Episcopal Church's decline is not even across the board. We're really seeing a sharp decline in rural parishes, in Rust Belt parishes, and for the first time ever, we're also seeing a huge decline in dioceses outside of the United States, such as Honduras and some of the other jurisdictions down near South America. And this is a very new development.
Well, I was surprised to see that the Diocese of South Carolina is still part of the numbers. I've went to the Diocese of South Carolina when they had their meeting that they're leaving. It's on record. It's on Anglican TV. It's gone through the courts. It's still in the courts to a certain degree. But if you ask anybody in the diocese, they should not be counted on the Episcopal Church's numbers. How did that happen?
Well, the Episcopal Church Office of Statistics compiles this data, mm-hmm. and the data that they get is coming from a diocese and from parishes in the church. So they take this data and compile it. And the regional entity in South Carolina, the Episcopal Church in South Carolina, or TECSC as we refer to it, reported that all of these parishes, which constitute 28,000 members and about 12,000 attendees, are still part of their numbers, which, as I've said before, is pretty baffling. However, it's not entirely unprecedented. When the Congregation of St. James in Newport Beach, California, left the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles, it took 7 years for the membership numbers from that congregation to be removed from the diocese report.
Well, is that part of the total 1%, or that's not included then?
This is not included. So when we see this 1.4% decline
Let me get my calculator here. Okay.
Well, when we see the 1.4% decline in membership and 2.6% decline in attendance, that does not include the departure of South Carolina, which in effect occurred over 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So when we see this number of 27,000 members dropping out of the Episcopal Church, that doesn't include South Carolina. If it were to include South Carolina, then I'd estimate that the number would be closer to 50,000, mm-hmm. which would be a much steeper loss. But again, for reasons unknown, TECSC has decided for the second year in a row to continue including these numbers, despite the fact that these people are long gone. What I've said is it's kind of like someone being out the door and past earshot, and you yell out past them, you can't leave. So that seems to be what's taking place here. I don't believe, by the way, that has anything to do with litigation. The previous, what we call renewing dioceses, which is those dioceses that are trying to reestablish themselves after the departure of traditionalists, they all reported their new reduced numbers minus the departed people the year after the departures. So this is somewhat novel for TECSC to continue to include these people over 2 years after they've left.
I saw some information that the Episcopal Church says, well, it's not as bad as it could have been. That's their line is, it could have been worse. And if you look at all the numbers of all the denominations. The Presbyterians are still shedding greater numbers than the Episcopal Church. United Methodist. You can go down the line. Most mainline denominations are still in a loss structure.
Mhm. Yes, they are. And the Peace USA losses have been especially severe over the last 2 years since the General Assembly of the Peace USA changed its teaching on marriages.
Mm-hmm.
So we've saw over 90,000 people depart the Peace USA in 2013, for example. The United Methodist Church is actually in pretty bad shape as well. They lost about 100,000. However, the United Methodist Church is also about 4 times the size of the Episcopal Church. So while the raw number of departures is larger, the percentage of departures is actually lower. But yes, all the mainline churches, all 7 of them, are suffering from some level of decline, and it's pretty consistent. And this is the peer group that the Episcopal Church compares itself to. Mm-hmm. When they go and say, oh, all churches are in decline, they don't think about the Assemblies of God, which has grown every year for the past 40 years. Right. They don't think about non-denominational evangelical megachurches, which are increasing in number in this country. They look around, and their peer group is the other mainline churches. However, it's important to note that when the Episcopal Church makes that viewpoint, they're not really providing a comprehensive picture of what the religious landscape looks like in the United States. Many people, of course, who are churchgoers in the United States belong to non-mainline churches, such as the Southern Baptist Convention or the Roman Catholic Church. Now, the Roman Catholic Church has continued to grow, although the Episcopal Church points out that, oh, well, that's because of immigration, which is partially true. Mm-hmm. And the Southern Baptist Convention for the past 7 years has actually been in a state of slight decline. They've lost about 0.5% of their membership.
Well, they're also starting to construct ideas that are different than biblical marriage. That may be troublesome to them in the future. Let's go beyond just looking at domestic tech. Global tech, the Episcopal Communion, if you want to call it, is also shedding numbers.
Yeah, there are about 12 or 13 dioceses or jurisdictions that are part of the Episcopal Church mm-hmm. that are located outside the United States. And most of these are remnants of different mission projects or areas that the Episcopal Church received several decades past. So mostly this is in Upper South America, parts of the Caribbean, and then scattered places like Taiwan. Now, the numbers from these overseas Episcopal dioceses have always been a little bit confusing. They weren't always updated on an annual basis. And some of the standards of reporting probably weren't as good as what domestic dioceses had. But this year, they instituted new reporting procedures in the way these people report, and it sliced by a huge margin the number of people out of these dioceses. So Haiti had a massive drop of about 20%. Haiti is the largest diocese in the Episcopal Church. Mm-hmm. And another one of the largest, Honduras, saw a 57% drop in its membership. Wow. So I don't believe that the Diocese of Honduras actually lost 57% of its members in 2013. No. What we were seeing was that those were massively inflated numbers that were not accurate before. And now that they're being brought down to earth, we're seeing a better picture of what's actually there. Well, but what it shows is that the Episcopal Church does not have a large, thriving presence outside of the United States. It's probably less than 200,000 people.
Now, if we look at, people go, well, they must be going broke. Well, that's not a reality on the ground because they have valuable real estate in locations like New York City and stuff like that. They have cell towers that are making money on some of these properties. They rent some others out as condos and apartments. And, the Episcopal Church is not going broke at this point because of reduced numbers.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. And if we look at the plate and pledge numbers, which is what people give to their parish, those are holding pretty much steady. If you factor in inflation, there is a slight decrease, but it by no means is it anywhere as dramatic as what we're seeing in the drops of membership and attendance. So even though the Episcopal Church may not have lots of easy money floating around as it once did, their financial situation is far from dire. And when a diocese does choose to shut down a parish, if the parish is located in an area that is of high real estate value, like Connecticut in your state, they can make some money by placing that congregation up, I mean, the building up for sale.
Mm-hmm.
And as we've seen, we previously talked about, Kevin, often evangelicals that are from outside of the Episcopal Church are very interested in stepping in and acquiring those properties because the spaces work well for Sunday worship.
Well, the Episcopal Church of Connecticut just put a property up in East Hartford. If you're looking for it, 600,000, not a bad piece of property. If you're Anglican, you can't get it. It's not for you. A radical Muslim, come on over. Jeff, I guess the important question we want to ask is, where do people go after they go to the Episcopal Church, the Lutheran Church, the United Methodist Church? Is there a tracking statistic that says they're going somewhere else or they're going home?
Unfortunately, the Episcopal Church doesn't have any sort of outgoing exit interview for people. So we only know anecdotally where people are headed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, there are some that are heading to Anglican Church in North America, although this is hardly a zero-sum game. And I wish it was, because if it was a zero-sum game, ACNA would be growing by 28,000 people a year.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these people are probably leaving to go to non-denominational churches. Some are becoming Roman Catholic, and some are simply ceasing to go to church altogether. What we do know is that there are demographic changes that are hurting the Episcopal Church. For all of its talk about inclusivity, the Episcopal Church is a predominantly white church, and I believe the statistic is about 87% of the church is white.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not a particularly fertile demographic chunk. So the average Episcopalian appears to be having less children than the broader population, and this really affects church decline. And we've seen this in the average age of Episcopalians. The average Episcopalian is 63 years old, according to the 2013 statistics. Now compare that to the average American, who is 35, which is my age. And that's a really huge gap. So what we've got here are demographic things which are not working in the Episcopal Church's favor because it's largely limited to the white Anglo population.
Well, that is concerning because the ideology or theology of the Episcopal Church is that of the modern 25 to 35-year-old. The progressive politics and all that. You would think the appeal there would fill the pews.
Yeah, you would think that, and that is certainly what Episcopal Church officials believe. I don't think they really have a good handle on why young millennials who espouse a political liberalism aren't gravitating to their churches. But we know it's not happening. What I would say is that here in Washington, D.C., as an anecdotal example, there are several ACNA congregations that are doing quite well that are in the city. And many of the people who are congregants of those congregations are socially liberal. And that may seem counterintuitive. Why would these people choose to affiliate with that congregation when they could go to an Episcopal church nearby, which offers something that is more in line with their belief system? Part of it is that these young people are looking for vibrancy, which is not found in Episcopal church congregations in many parts of the United States. Another element is that even though they may have revisionist views on things like human sexual practices, they still adhere to things like creeds, and they believe in important things like the resurrection of Christ as a bodily event that actually occurred, as opposed to being something that's metaphorical. So these are significant differences. I would suspect, but I do not know, that when a church and its teachings align with the prevailing culture, there's not much of a differentiation, and there's not really a reason to attend. So if your church is saying what culture around you is saying, then people aren't necessarily going to find a reason to go. And Episcopal Church officials, when they've been asked to make a case for why people should attend their congregations, they often fall back on things that make them look like the United Way, of saying, oh, well, look what we're doing with the soup kitchen, look what we're doing with the preschool or the elderly care center. And those are all laudable things, but ultimately they don't involve life change, and they don't seem to be attractional agents that bring people into church communities.
Well, we've managed to fill people's minds with statistics, numbers, and all that. Jeff, I want to thank you for your help on Wednesday. We'll try and keep it lighter for Friday. We let you off the hook on Monday. Jeff, thank you again for your time.